Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Gramlich and Mac Lane podcast, presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Gramlich and Mac Lane. And we've got a great message from Ingles coming up. But Mac, this episode, this guest, our last two, we had Michael Alford on from Florida State Athletic Director. And this episode, we have Graham Neff, the Athletic Director from Clemson, two of the most powerful athletic directors in the country. I would say probably the two most powerful in the ACC, and just honored that they would give us some of their time because they're two of the busiest guys in the world. But this was a lot of just really good insight from Graham. Both these guys very thoughtful about the future of athletics, but also making it clear, like Michael Alford's job is to keep Florida State where it needs to be, and Graham's is for Clemson. And I think both schools are in good hands with those guys.
No, I don't think there's any question about it. And you know, after having spoken to both of them, the thoughtfulness, like you said, very calculated in how they approach each and every day. Funny enough, both very money-oriented guys that just understand that
their backgrounds,
kind of what we talked about with Michael, that it's not just coaches that retire that move into ADs. Like, these are businessmen.
Yeah.
This is a Deloitte guy and a guy
these guys are smart.
Very smart.
Like, they got degrees.
Yeah, that's multiple degrees. And so when you look at it and when you kind of think through their eyes or hear it and see it through their eyes, it was really cool. So very grateful for Graham's time. I joke about it here in a second, but when he told us, hey, let's do it at 2:00, I'm like, gee, there's no way that you can do this. Like, I know what your schedule looks like.
He's so busy.
He made it happen, though. He made it happen. Very grateful for his time. You'll hear about as we talk about this, but in his first year as a Clemson AD, the Tigers won 4 ACC championships, the most that Clemson has won since '99, which is very impressive, the way that they do that. And it was just fun to hear how he's been balancing this new world that has NIL, that has the transfer portal, that has all these things that his guy – Dan Radakovich didn't really have to deal with,
right.
At Clemson at least. He still does it at Miami. So it's very interesting that even when he's been at Clemson for 10 years and probably thought he had a pretty good grasp on what that athletic director job would look like, here's a big old curveball. We're going to throw a bunch of new things, and you got to always get better in this ever-evolving landscape. So love this conversation. Before we get to the interview, let's hear from our friends over at Ingles.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings.
Graham Neff, welcome in, brother. Super excited for this. You made some time. We're doing this in the middle of the day. And when you sent that text to us, I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. But here we are. You did it. I appreciate you joining us, brother.
Summer series. Thanks for having it on. You guys just eclipsed, 300 going on 500?
We're close to 300. We're close to 300 right there.
You say you're excited. Hey, important guest, big – like, I'm number 300 on your list. So I don't know if 30 whatever. So I don't know how much of an important guest I am. But needless to say, thanks for having me, Joel.
You know what's interesting about that? We were actually trying to stay – just because you're in a big position, man. We don't know how much you want to talk about or the scrutiny of what you say, but we're going to keep it clean. All softballs today. It's going to be super easy.
Softball, I got it. Yeah,
that's right. You see the fun? You see the fun? Shout out to Valerie and Coach going over to Japan representing the Tigers. So excited for that. But I just want to start with you, man, because there's a million places we're going to go. And just your love for college athletics, how you decided to get into this business, why you decided to get in this business. And, man, once you maybe had that thought, did you ever think one day, you'd be sitting in that chair as the AD of Clemson University?
It's really right. And all colleagues or all of us that have, love sports or college sports have our story, and I'll certainly give some highlights of mine. But it is really cool. We're sitting here in mid-June. And just this upcoming weekend, tomorrow, actually, I'm heading to North Georgia Lake with a bunch. There's about 12 of my buddies from high school, like middle school and high school. So one of my crews from way back, decades now, and just loves. And it's funny, so they all give me grief now. Hey, big time job, and hey, can we get some tickets? Those type of things. But I'm sure they would all tell you that, man, even back then, this is a perfect vocation for maybe who I am, right? Just love sports, played everything, just love the competition. But I wasn't a collegiate student athlete. I was a student manager, which I'm very proud of, as is Jay Billis for basketball student manager. So I went to school at Georgia Tech, was a manager on the basketball team there. My sophomore year is actually when Georgia Tech went to the Final Four, the national championship game. Paul Hewitt, Coach Hewitt, was the head coach, who was just an awesome coach, let alone to, all of those as part of the program, including the managers. So learned a lot, just kind of had that level of introduction from student manager. And I felt like it's a really interesting, I'm really proud of it. And I try to invest some time with the student managers that we have here in our sports, because it's a really unique maybe blend of, you get the student athlete kind of perspective. Maybe you're not a student athlete, but like you're a college student and these are all your pals, or they're your same age. And so you kind of lean that way, but then also like you're like manager, or like on the, support the coaches. And so you're on the coaches side of things too. So it was just, it's an awesome introduction into college athletics, let alone just the grunt work or the discipline that, student managers maybe have, or at least have the reputation to. So something I'm really proud of. Again, that was a little bit my literal entree into college athletics, but I didn't jump right into it. After school at Georgia Tech, as I said, worked for Deloitte Consulting, so kind of call it corporate a bit for a couple years. Loved that as a first job, but it was definitely a great time that convinced me of the need or the opportunity to come back to something that's so passionate about, which is sports athletics, but ultimately they call it the business of sports, and how that's continued to change, that I'm sure we'll talk about, and have just enjoyed that opportunity to invest and help, enact change in the industry, but even more so certainly locally of wherever your school may be.
You are an engineer, as I was seeing through your degree, and of course, Georgia Tech. So that's such an interesting pivot there. And Graham, I'm curious, I think you grew up kind of the Atlanta area, you go to Georgia Tech. What was your perception or memory or just knowledge of Clemson growing up?
So I do have a great story with that. A lot of, certainly call it respect. It is close, local. A lot of, I went to high school with pals that went to Clemson, so just loved the brand, what Clemson was about, but it was rather surface. Freshman year at Georgia Tech, one of my good friends from high school came to Clemson. So he's freshman at Clemson. And that year, this is 2002, Clemson plays at, Georgia Tech plays at Clemson in football. It was like October, and came out for the game, stayed with my pal. And then I sat on the hill. So I sat on the hill. He was a freshman.
Oh.
Tickets were on the. I stood on the hill, and it was rainy, drizzly that day, and so I had a poncho on. And I had classic, my yellow or gold poncho. So I was that guy that was like in clearly the Clemson section, little student section, let alone the hill, as the visiting fan or whatever. And so, so my first experience at Clemson was a game my freshman year when Georgia Tech played at Clemson in 2002. But I would tell you this, I'll extend it beyond that. My time as a manager at Georgia Tech, we certainly played at Little John every year, and coming up and again with the team as a manager for those couple seasons, 3 seasons, we stayed at what was then kind of the brand new Madrid Center Martin Inn.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience at Georgia Tech, urban campus, not a whole lot of green space, and came up to Clemson, and we're staying on the golf course at this new conference center that the arena is just down the street. I just thought it was just so special. I was like, look at this place. This is Clemson. And so had that level of like experience, but then even as a student, like had that level of respect. I think a lot of, similar backgrounds of academics and kind of the heavy architect engineering kind of for the history of the institutions, let alone the alumni and the support and kind of the community. So I think there's certainly that healthy rivalry then that still exists now between the two schools, but from a level of, of respect and maybe similarity. So anyway, that's a couple small tokens of what my entree or origins to Clemson was. Last component to it, when Chris and I were moving to Clemson in 2013, it's been 10 years now.
Wow.
We were at Middle Tennessee State near Nashville. Kristen got really excited because the school colors were great. Orange and purple. Oh, she can outfit it and everything. And so you get that aspect too, that, just the markers of as you're approaching Clemson, not knowing really, but having experienced it now for 10 years has just been incredible.
Mac, and little known fact that people might not know, when I was in grad school, Kristen Neff was my yoga instructor. And I still tell people that Kristen is the best yoga instructor I've ever taken a class from.
That's right.
She is elite. And I was still going to her classes when I worked at the Roar, and then she got pregnant with twins. Ugh. And my yoga has gone so downhill since then.
Yeah, she had to just semi-retire or whatnot. But yes, Neff boys keep both of us busy. Certainly Kristen during the day. Grady's a rising first grader. The twins, Nolan, will be 4 this summer, so they got a couple years until they're kindergartners, and then Kristen perhaps will be able to respread her wings in yoga or fitness or whatever it may be. Kelly,
let's hope.
There you go. It's a game changer. Well, gee, man, let's dive into kind of Clemson athletics and different things of that nature, because college athletics has changed immensely, in your 10 years, since you've been at Clemson. And one thing that hasn't changed, though, is that we're in this arms race for all the shiny new things, whether it's facilities, upgrades, everything in between. I've always been fascinated in this. How do you decide when it is time to upgrade something, when it is time to build something new? Because, we've got an indoor that was built, I think, 2012 December-ish was when that got done.
Yep.
When do you redo that? Like a project like that versus you have this brand new football facility that was really cutting edge and one of the first that I'm sure down the road that will come along where you have to do some outfitting. So what goes into that? How do you calculate that?
Yeah, it's a great point or question, Mac. And I'd extend it this way to the arms race, which maybe has a bad connotation. It's just from a competitive standpoint, for our student athletes, for resources and opportunities for them to thrive. Certainly there's the fan-facing aspects of it, stadiums, video boards, right, concourses, that is providing great amenities or opportunities for revenue generation or discretionary dollar, which is, never been more in competition. But I guess my point is you extend the notion even to a higher ed standpoint, right, where universities, institutions, Clemson certainly included, there's an arms race, not in a bad way, but just like a need to invest and continue to grow for dorms and classroom buildings and labs and incubator spaces. Clemson just opened an entrepreneurship studio and opened a new college of business. So that notion in many industries, but even higher ed, let alone just college athletics, that's our world. And I think there's a lot of good with that. Now back to your question, or more specific to your question, right, what's the strategy? How do you evaluate? How do you prioritize? It's not easy. We have 21 sports now, including the 2 new ones that I'm sure we'll talk about, KG, of women's lacrosse and gymnastics. And so, and we want to compete in all of them. And we like football here, no doubt. And we have a lot of success. And we're going to continue to invest significantly there as we have. And obviously the results and the support has come with that. But we want to win championships in all of our sports, right? Which is an easy thing to say, but what's the actions? What's the priority to do so? So no doubt it's an art versus science, and ultimately how you manage priorities, how you manage donor intent or opportunity. We are spending $37 million right now. We'll finish it this fall, our brand new lacrosse and gymnastics and rowing complex, right? And admittedly, those are not net revenue generating sports. There's a lot of interest in our community for gymnastics, as there was for lacrosse last year, and so we're going to generate revenue. They are not non-revenue sports, but from a business perspective, right? It's football and basketball and baseball, but a lot of our sports really, beyond that, aren't. But it's really important for student experience. Sure, call it equity, but just from a competitive drive standpoint. A couple things, Mac, you referenced as well, is the indoor facility. So there is, there's absolutely the aspect of continual investment or expansion. So that it was built in 2012, literally just last month. You probably haven't been back and got your shuttles in yet, Mac, but we just replaced the turf. So where you did mat drills and blood, sweat, and tears was just replaced. It was here for 10 years. And
is that up for sale or what? I need some of that, man. I feel like I'm owed some of that.
So there is that, and that's a pretty rudimentary. Yeah, you got to change the turf out, but we have been had continual investment even in the other facility you referenced, the Reese football operations facility where we just did some expansion with our 100 yards of wellness, which was a $5 million investment. We just added our CAB Athletics Branding Institute, which is really a bolt-on or a build-on to that, because you do balance not only your question, the needs and how do you choose sports and priority of facilities, but also, when do you build new, so to speak, versus the renovate or expand on. One last example is later this fall, we've received phase 1 approval, and we've announced it, but later this fall, we'll announce groundbreaking of a new facility, performance and wellness facility, which is really an extension of Jervey. Jervey was built in 1972. It's literally 50 years old. It's the house, Kelly, you went to training room there, weight room there. Yeah. And, and it was okay, but it needs it, even when you were playing, Kelly, like it needs time and attention and investment. And so we looked at renovation and expansion. Decision was best made to build new. And so now it'll be a high impact facility that will affect really 18 of our 21 sports, Olympic sports focused, volleyball access as well. Think sports med, training, strength and conditioning, high day-to-day impact for so many of about 400 of our 525 student athletes. So anyway, I hope that's more of the art than science of how we think about it. And it's not easy, but we're going to continue to have the pedal to the metal on that while we're balancing all the other demands from resources.
Yeah. And one thing, Graham, that's super interesting too, that, just kind of adds to the uniqueness of Clemson is you've got a lot of land and you got a lot of green space and opportunity that it's a lot more unique than a place like Miami and the things that D-Rad's having to deal with and Georgia Tech, the things that they're having to deal with. You've got space. So does it ever creep into your mind, like, what if I was in a major metropolis? How would I deal with things like this?
Here, it's funny. I don't know if you and I have talked about that in the past. You're absolutely right. And I've had to, and again, growing up in Atlanta, going to school, Georgia Tech, like we talked about, I had to, and we fiddle around a lot, pull up Google Maps, and you're looking at spaces. Can we do this? Which is kind of your point. But a lot of green space here. You look around, look out the windows. But holy cow, that green space is really, really important and valuable for 7 Saturdays from a tailgate and parking and IPTAY side of things. So you're right, Mac. You look at Google Maps, you take a lap around campus. Holy cow, all this opportunity, and that's really different than downtown Atlanta or Miami or what have you. And you're right. But we don't take that lightly of, great, there's green grass, and so let's build something, because that is proverbially, really, really
sacred ground, man.
Yeah, ground. And that's not to say that we've expanded and we'll continue to expand, and so we can't, we're just going to continue to do that, but it's done with a lot of thought and strategy as it balances 7 Saturdays, IPTAY, and what that tailgating scene is like here at Clemson, which also is really, really unique compared to most anybody in the country.
Well, every IPTAY member is happy to hear that, because the biggest question, the biggest thing on their mind is, where am I going to park? Exactly. We know that's a big deal. Okay, before we get to mainly football and talk about that, because this is what we love. Overall, women's athletics, we were talking with Mike Alford from Florida State about women's sports. And Florida State values women's sports. Clemson values women's sports. I mean, there's schools out there that almost you can kind of tell value them a little more than others. The future of that, with what we're seeing, we're talking about Clemson building these facilities, but we know that's the backdrop of these TV deals, and all the money comes from football in many respects. Is the biggest way to ensure that women's sports are going to be, maintained and thrive, is the biggest thing for you bringing in fundraising dollars for that? Like, is that the way at this point to kind of keep women's sports safe, if you will?
I guess I think about it, and Kelly, you were an integral part. Gosh, you emceed our Hear Her Roar campaign.
Yes, Hear Her Roar.
Last summer. This was less than
That's right.
12 months ago, which was it was a kickoff of our $50 million women's sports fundraising initiative, right? Hear Her Roar campaign that you emceed and introduced. Beth Clements, wife of a president of our university, and coaches and key figures, and you yourself, a key figure here. So to answer your question, sure, fundraising is a driver of that. But I would say that, at least how I maybe think about it in a dollars and cents way, is, perhaps there's at Clemson, let's be realistic, like there's a lot of interest in donor support, sure, for football, basketball, baseball, right? That's just, that's traditional in college sports, let alone here at Clemson. And so while we absolutely are very intentional about fundraising for women's sports, here, her Aurora campaign, Lauren Gollins, a major gift officer for us, we were building a $37 million. So yes. However, like where we can also drive fundraising dollars for other sports that have perhaps a higher ceiling of donor opportunity, that allows us to move the needle or push or invest in maybe those specific sports. And then now we have to match that, not in a have to way, but like from a competitive side of things, that's going to, our mindset is that it needs to be, a both level of investment. And so I think that our story here at Clemson is something that I feel very passionate of telling about the growth of our investment over women's sports. Kelly, your point, central point. We're adding two new prominent women's sports. Just finished year one of lacrosse, where we finished ranked top 20 in the country. We're approaching year one of women's gymnastics, of which it'll be the first year for ACC gymnastics. There's 4 schools in the ACC that will sponsor gymnastics. So we have an opportunity to win an ACC championship in year one. Coach Amy Smith knows expectations, a funny word, but like that, hey, we're investing to set those type of goals in all of our sports. We finished this academic year just completed with 4 ACC championships: football, women's golf, men's outdoor track, and baseball. Those 4 in 1 year was the most at Clemson since 1999, 24 years.
Wow.
And tied for the most. And I would also reference in 1999, there was only 9 schools in the ACC. Now we have 15.
Okay, that was way more difficult.
So something we're really proud of. We're going to continue to invest across the board. Football is really important here and nationally for a lot of reasons, but also from a business and revenue standpoint to allow us to, the proverbial, raise the tide in all boats. And that's important. Want to win in all now 21 sports. Including and especially our women's sports.
No doubt. Well, you bring it up. So let's talk about football before we move on to kind of big picture athletics here, because you and Coach Sweeney made probably the biggest hire of the offseason, and that's bringing in Coach Garrett Riley. And nobody knew until the freaking ink was dry.
Mac, who
how
called
the
it, though?
heck you did call it. KG did call it. How did you do that? How did you keep it a secret? What was the process? As much as you can share. I know there's details, but I mean, that was incredible when that news kind of broke.
So it is an awesome, I don't know if story is the right word, but just look back. It's certainly my role and have been here 10 years, as I said, and have worked closely with Coach Sweeney football program from day one, but obviously now in the last year and a half, different role and even probably a different level of partnership or strategy, call it. Certainly that change from a coordinator standpoint, driven by Coach, but he and I had talked on it off and on over that, the end of the season until into mid-January when the transition transpired. A lot of the sequencing or the timing was born out of respect and doing it the right way for Brandon Streeter, who's awesome Clemson man and family, was a heck of a player here, let alone a heck of a coach. And so wanted to make sure that there was the steps and the conversations along the way were really, really sensitive to that. So that was certainly one of the drivers. And listen, like it's been well written and so much a part of the success of Clemson football and how Coach Sweeney has led is the culture of the program and staff continuity and consistency in locker room, right? All of that, Mac, that you were a huge part of and still are. And so a change like that, like this, from a coordinator position was, significant on so many levels. Mm-hmm. And so working through that, where it was just a really, really tight circle, and it might not even have been a circle, it might have been a line with Dabo, right? It was really, it was really cool to be able to support Dabo in that, that consideration or that opportunity. From what my role, was and is, but then also to be really prudent about how it went down, knowing that one of the moments, wow, there was a couple of day stretch of, hey, think this is going to happen, but let's make sure we are in sequence with each other, because Coach had, his kind of call it list of dominoes or people to meet, in certain steps, and players and staff and offensive staff and parent, and so did I, but mine was very different, right? President, board, HR, whatever, And so we kind of were just being very intentional about making sure that we were each on the same page of what each of us needed to do by way of what our roles were,
right?
That we didn't get out of sequence and call into question the actual transition, but that also that we were able to when it was go time at certain steps, we're able to move very efficiently. And certainly, for me, it works up through President Clements and our board. And so to have that level of sensitive, but really, trusted type dialogue and decision points, that those aren't just created in a moment of a couple of days where you want to make a change like this. Those are day to day. We talk about alignment a lot here, right? And so that's where when there are significant decisions that are made or rolled out, where that alignment is stressed isn't the right word, but where it's really put to the test or where it's really flexed. And so I think that was a great this change, while it, to your point, Mac, it feel like it came out of left field and it was done before it was done. That was born out of, days, months, years worth of relationships, of process, of understanding, how things work at Clemson, how things need to work in the football facility and with staff. And then you get successes, like you said, of how things like that get rolled out. So I hope some of that is a little bit of inside baseball on how it went without getting too particular.
That's right.
But incredibly pleased of certainly sure how that transpired, but obviously what Garrett's going to bring to the program, the offense, and a little bit of even what that change means, which is part of your point.
Yeah, no question. So what kind of message do you think that sends throughout college football? I mean, that a team that just won a championship, that was in a New Year's Six, was getting better, thinks that, hey, there's another step that we can take. Let's go get the best coordinator in the country. What kind of message do you think that sends out to everybody else?
Yeah, strong in probably a number of different ways. It's a good indication. And we haven't made the playoffs in the last 2 years. And Coach Williams will be the first to tell you of where his expectations are for his program. And so, listen, Clemson, our brand, success, how we recruit, is just different. I happen to be, this is interesting, you bring up the topic of Coach Riley. I happened to be at dinner with Garrett on Monday night a couple days ago with his wife, Lindsay, and Kristen and some friends. And so we were just coming off of certainly June official visits and kind of heavy recruiting month, right? And Garrett's been here now 6 months, less than that. And so we're just kind of having a portion of our conversation about, and he was remarking like, God, it's just different here, right? That's something that Clemson folks it's just different here. But so now he's, hadn't been at Clemson before per se, and just how even recruiting or official visits work, certainly how Coach Sweeney leads the program, the culture of the program, of the locker room. And so, but that, my point was, to answer your question, that was, while it wasn't known for Garrett, that reputation of Clemson, of Coach Sweeney, different to work for, go about our business differently, in a Clemson unique way. That was a big part of his pull or his consideration to come and leave an awesome setup at TCU, national championship game, and come to Clemson because, he had heard that, he sensed that, he desired that for he and his family and his career. And then now for him for 6 months, kind of fire hosing it, but to be able to look back a half year and kind of recognize and have experienced that, it was a little bit of full circle is not the right word, but for him seeing the reality of maybe the reputation out there of Clemson, sure, from a recruiting, from a college football world, but even in the coaching circles, right? And how from learning from Coach Sweeney and seeing how things are done differently at different places and how that's just going to help Garrett continue to be a great coach at Clemson and whatever's ahead for him, I think is a cool part of that allure or that statement of what that change and what that attraction of Clemson was for him.
Well, now I have to know, before I ask about the ACC, speaking of the Rileys, did you also go to the Kenny Chesney concert with Dabo and Lincoln and Garrett? It seemed like it was a real who's who, Graham.
I don't know if that's about. Yes, I was there.
I knew it.
So yeah, I don't know if I walked in. So Dabo and Garrett and Lincoln, and I actually had one of my best friends I'm going to see this weekend. He's one of my high school best friends who came up from Atlanta for it, and it was one of those, right? I got some tickets, and he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I didn't really know exactly how it was all going to work, but one thing led to another, and we were kind of down there with Coach and the Rileys and some folks and met Kenny, and it was that was a special deal. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Okay, did we give Kenny some Clemson gear? Isn't he a Tennessee fan, right?
All right, right. The whole East Tennessee, he's got some songs written about that. Here's the right, Mac. Here's the deal, though. At one point, this was like a holy cow, welcome to my job moment. We were down. This was post-concert. Golly, I'm getting in the weeds here.
Oh, we love it.
Post-concert, kind of backstage, and small Kenny like had a heck of a show. He's down there, and he's kind of debriefing the show, and he was like, yeah, like after the third song, I thought the crowd we needed to, and it really hit into high gear, and and I was like, I thought the whole thing was awesome, but my point was, so he's going, he loves college football and concerts, and Sweeney's like, hey, you need to come play in the Valley, and Kenny's like, that's awesome, it was like, oh, I do that, and they both look at me, and so I got Kenny Chesney and Dabo Sweeney looking at me. Garrett Riley's like off in the, Lincoln Riley are kind of like chuckling. And they're looking at me like, hey, Neff, make this happen.
Get it done.
Like,
Get it done.
I got Chesney and Sweeney leaning on me. So I was like, all right, let me work on some things. So no promises for the Valley, but that was a discussion that recently ensued, and who knows what down the road.
So there may or may not be a contract on a napkin somewhere. I like it. Okay, breaking news. We'll get that out there.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, look, Graham, make it happen. I think every Clemson fan's going to be thinking that now after listening to this. We appreciate those stories. I also love the name drop, right? I'm just sitting with Kenny after the show, and we're debriefing, and he's telling me how his show went. That's pretty big time, Graham.
Kenny's mom was, this is a fun, I know we're wrapping up the Chesney Chronicles.
We don't have to. We do not.
Kenny's mom happened to be at that show, and so like I was backstage doing something, not to have it sound that way, but then Kristen, who we've talked about, my lovely roommate, at some point she's just like, her and Mrs. Chesney are like, now they're like texting their pals, and
I'm not surprised.
Kenny's mom, and not surprised, exactly. So it was that was a special night, no doubt.
Okay, well, we've got the hookup. If we're in with Kenny's mom, I think we can get Kenny to Death Valley. This is amazing. I'm very excited for this.
I'm sure that coming up soon, that Kenny's mom is going to text Kristen's like, hey, where's Graham on this contract? For like, it's all just coming back to, hey, Neff's got to figure something out. So I'll take the burden.
Ball's in your court, Graham. Okay, let's talk about the ACC. And I want to ask this a little differently, okay? What, in this current landscape of college football, as someone who is the head of one of the ACC's member institutions, what does the ACC have going for it right now, and what does the ACC need to improve upon right now in the current landscape?
One of the things with the ACC, and there's been a lot written, and even our spring meetings, like I got it. I think one of the and I growing up in suburban Atlanta, the Southeast, Georgia Tech alum, I'm an ACC guy. I think one of the things, one of the best attributes of the ACC has had for probably since its inception is the diversity of the league. Public schools, private schools, big schools, small schools, Northeast, Southeast, all throughout the, Florida to Syracuse and Midwest, Louisville, Notre Dame. Football maybe focused or strong tradition, basketball focused, strong tradition. So the diversity of the institutions of the league, I think, has been such a level of success and an attribute for decades. You overlay that into current changing landscape, and it certainly proves to be difficult, or maybe better said, proves to add, you have so many different perspectives or opinions as an association, as a league, and what's important for each school is probably more diverse than maybe other leagues where there's maybe a little bit more level of overlap of importance. So that's maybe just some commentary or some perspective on why, that it's really tough to coalesce around really focused priorities, so to speak, for college athletics these days, let alone maybe what has transpired a little bit for the ACC. That being said, Commissioner Phillips, I think there's been a lot said or written. I'll further just the job that he's doing from the commissioner's chair. And listen, he's a longtime AD, right? He's been a key figure, a mentor for me from afar, and certainly now from near for years. So I really value him as a man, as a father, husband, let alone as an administrator, let alone as our commissioner. And so as he's helped to further the league, and certainly the success initiatives, call it revenue distribution shares, how that's transpired, really important. Commissioner's been really steadfast in prioritizing that for the league presidents, ADs to look at and consider. And we've had some progress, and that is going to roll through this summer or fall, right, as we work a process with it. So I think, Kelly, that's maybe a little bit of an answer to, hey, what has the league done well? I think there has been some cohesion around some of the priorities. I think Commissioner Phillips, as he said from day one of introduction a couple years ago now, of prioritizing football. And we've seen that kind of day to day, but I think we've seen the external, vocation of that in various ways, from a media, from PR, from a football investment standpoint. That obviously goes in line well with maybe how we've invested and prioritized in the past here at Clemson. So, so you have that. Listen, my colleagues in the league, it's been one of the things for me that has been such a blessing from a career standpoint, that my predecessor here at Clemson and personal friend and mentor professionally, Radakovich Dan, that he's not only still in the industry, but he's in the league. And so we have our spring meetings, or we're on, Zoom calls, and Dan and I certainly spend a lot of time together, and that's huge for me as, first time in this chair, so to speak, let alone like how we're, operating or helping to position or further the league being at two, the bigger brands in the league. So I don't know. I hope, Kelly, that answers some of it, and in and out of the question, and just some perspective on where the league sits, and maybe where I hope what Clemson's role should and can be as we look to further grow the revenue and position the league from a branding standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. These are literally things that haven't happened a ton. I mean, it's happened. I mean, we go back and look at history, realignment and changing conferences and TV rights and all these things. It's happened. But everything just seems like it's so magnified right now, just in the world that we live in. So appreciate your answer. Appreciate your honesty. Last one, we'll get you out of here. I know you got to run. I do want your kind of opinion on realignment, on expansion, just from a general consumer, just from a guy who loves athletics, is in athletics. Is this good for college athletics? Is it going to wipe parts of college athletics out? Are we seeing this seismic shift to where we have a baby NFL? I don't think you can have a baby NBA. Those products are so different right now. I don't think that can exist, but it is where we're going good for college athletics.
Yeah, and it's interesting you even say baby NBA. And Mac, we all know, or at least I know, listen, you're a big old dude, tight end, offensive lineman, played, NFL but you're a hooper at heart, right? Let's be honest, KG. Like, he needs to get a little action on the network.
That's right. Yeah. Come on.
But right, like baby NBA, like the NBA has that, like G League, you know, in minor league systems, baseball, whatever. Like, that's where, to your point a little bit, Mac, football is different because there isn't the developmental leagues. And I know, like, you do the XFL stuff. I think there's a lot of growth and opportunity there, which I think is really healthy for college football, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And Mac, you have an awesome and compelling story about how you have some passion of the those leagues from a professional football standpoint. Right. But right now, historically that's been a pretty straightforward jump from NFL to college football from a developmental standpoint. So that's where, it is different, to your point. Is it good? Is expansion? Is conference alignment, realignment? I think there's pros and cons. I certainly recognize, and I'm not going to dismiss the difficulties of losing some of the regionality, right? And what it looks like for student athlete experience, for travel, for fan travel, for kind of natural rivalries, right? That there's probably that's tough, and I think there's
flying from UCLA to Rutgers.
Sure, yeah. Let's be honest, right? So don't want to be naive or dismiss that, or I'll address that head on. I think some of that is not good.
Agreed.
I do think though that the further alignment of big brands, schools that are like-minded for investment, and how that does create even more of like a powerful, prominent national awareness and national, call it investment in college sports or college football. I think there's some good with that. So how it continues to ebb and flow, again, because that is one of the things too. College sports, so much of football drives the revenue, right? We know this. But as we've talked about at Clemson, we have 20 other sports, and how we associate and how perhaps we're regional and what that looks like for travel, for experience, just for competitiveness, right? It's just really different. And so much has been talked about or written about, hey, should there be a separate football? They should break off. Like, I don't know. Again, I think there's a lot of good for that. I don't want to dive down that path right now. Maybe 400.
Well, that was my next question. So I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
No. Listen, recognize, and again, I know I'm a younger dude for amongst my colleagues, so I hope to be doing this role specifically at Clemson for decades to come. And so I hope to be able to be positioned myself, let alone, it's Clemson, Tiger Paw, to be a leader in what the future state of college athletics, let alone maybe football, looks like. And so there's a lot of change at hand. Maybe the best way that you say it is, there's all these seminal changes, not seminole changes, in college athletics right now. NIL, transfer portal, college football playoff expansion, NCAA governance, leadership change. And those are all like significant organizational changes that maybe historically would happen over decades. They're happening over a handful of years. And so like all this flux and turmoil is just what's so difficult right now. And so what's the end game, or where do you kind of come to maybe a better stasis? You try to work towards that. I think there's some good ideas. Has there been, and will there be bumps along the way? 100%. We're right in the dearths of that, it feels like right now. But I think there is some good for change. There is some difficulties that you like the traditional aspects and regionality, Mac. But future state of the game in college sports, I think, couldn't be brighter. We just got to get there in a great way about it.
No doubt. Well, hold on to your seatbelts, everybody, because we're full steam ahead. And we'll get you out of here, Graham. I know you got to go. Appreciate your time, brother. This was so much fun. Appreciate you joining us.
This was a special one. Thank you guys for having me. Good luck for the rest of your summer series. Have me back on before 400, I hope.
Deal.
Maybe. Jacob, Amelia, hope they're doing great. KG, Matt, good to see you guys. Later.
Well, so many things that we learned from Graham Neff. And he was awesome. He's a good friend of both of ours too, and just a really great guy in addition to his athletic director role. But the Kenny Chesney part of this interview very much intrigued me, Eric McLean. I saw Kenny Chesney last year in Charlotte at the Bank of America Stadium. And he's definitely a football guy because he brought out Christian McCaffrey and Matt Rule during that concert. Of course, neither of them are with the Panthers anymore, which is funny. But when Kenny was in Greenville recently, Dabo and Lincoln Riley came on stage. If you haven't seen that, go look it up. Of course, Graham was there. And now we are hearing about the possibility of a Kenny Chesney concert in Death Valley. This is the biggest news of the summer, okay?
It really is.
I don't really care about everything else that we talked. I do care. But this is the biggest news of the summer. And I love the fact that Dabo and Kenny are talking about doing this concert, and they both look at Graham and they say, come on, man. Are we doing it or not? That was a great story.
It's not often that we get to have breaking news on the podcast, but Tiger Net, get it written up there. Kenny Chesney coming to the Valley. Graham's going to hate me for saying that, but
the potential.
It'd be great. It'd be great to see it done. I think that our grounds crew, which they do an unbelievable job, they would not want that to happen either.
They're the only people that are mad when they hear that.
That's right. They don't want any part of that. But no, it was great, talking with Graham again and hearing all the things that he's dealing with. Was very, interested in how much of that story that he would share, about Coach Riley and how all that went down. I mean, it was so fast for you and I, KG, kind of inside outsiders. But for them, it was a couple-day process. And hearing him tell that story and how, he and Coach Sweeney had these checks that they had to get through and had to do it at the same time. I mean, think of all the organization that, went behind that. Inside baseball, as Graham said.
You got to be in lockstep. And Mac, that's how something doesn't get leaked.
Exactly.
When those two are so in step with each other, and you trust the people around you, that's how it didn't get leaked, for sure.
Yeah. So very impressive. Everyone involved that did not get leaked, and it was very much when it was announced. It was announced, and that's when people really found out. Excited to see that. And what this is going to ultimately look like. I asked him, what message does that send out? And to me, KG, I think it's a power play. It's a massive power play. And everybody kind of, coming at Clemson, even still after that, in the month of June, I got texts from 3 or 4 people that are in the college football space, not ACC network people, by the way, that said, what's going on with Clemson? What's up with recruiting? Nobody's being picked up. What's going on? I said, guys, it's only June. Like, everybody relax. And then, of course, Clemson goes on this magical, commitment train where now they're top 5, top 6, whatever it is, at the different recruiting sites there. So Clemson's going to be just fine. And I know everyone rolling their eyes, they hear me say that Clemson guy, but I'm excited to see that, excited for this football season. And just talking with G there about the different things, it got me jacked up a little bit.
It did. And I think, it's great talking with Michael Alford and Graham. And then, of course, Commissioner Phillips, who we both really like and respect in the job he's doing.
Yeah.
The ACC obviously has some issues as we're dealing in this current landscape. But if anyone can figure out what to do, I do think it's Commissioner Phillips, and then with Alford and Neff. Sure. Trying to push the ACC forward. That's what Michael Alford said. He said, I'm at Florida State, I have to push.
Yeah.
And I think, Graham's the same way. And you and I said this as we got off the call with Graham. With the ACC, it feels like the diversity of the ACC is both its strength and its weakness.
Sure.
So how can you accentuate the strength and mitigate the weakness as much as possible? I think that's the biggest challenge.
And I think, to dive into that a little bit more, what does that mean? You've got very small, very private institutions, a bigger institution that they're going ahead. Things that matter to one don't necessarily matter as much to the other. So while it is great, and I think we celebrate that we have this very different blend of minds and thought process and importance, exactly what you just said, that can split and divide and hurt you ultimately if you can't come together for one common goal. I think that Commissioner Phillips is that guy. I think these presidents, chancellors, whatever, throughout the league, I think these ADs, I think that they're going to all rally, and there's going to be ultimately something that comes out that gets you going in the right direction. Now, this ever-evolving space, who knows what could happen, what will happen as we continue to go down, whether it's teams leaving, teams changing. But at the end of the day, I feel very positive about where the conference is trending, where the members are trending. And one way that you can heal all of that is go win on the football field. Go take care of business. We've got a great schedule, a lot of out-of-conference guys, KG, that these matchups can really make a difference.
Mac, I am pumped to start talking some actual X's and O's and games soon.
I am too.
And we actually, behind the scenes, we just interviewed Mac Brown. We're going to release that in August. And just like the UNC South Carolina game, I mean, I'm so ready to talk some games. So we will get there. We're still in our summer guest series, which has been a great time. If you've missed any episodes, go to YouTube, go to Apple Podcasts. They're all up there. We've had some awesome guests. But yeah, football's around the corner. It's almost July, which means basically football season is here.
We're close. I think we're right at 70-something days, KG. So
that's nothing.
Jacked up, and we'll be there before you can know it. But appreciate you guys watching another great episode of Gramlich and Mac Lane, brought to you by our friends over at Ingles. You saw the commercial earlier. That curbside pickup, it's the best way to do it. The convenience. We need to make a video of that, KG, because I think it just saves you time, effort, all these things. Let's make that happen. But guys, go over to YouTube. If you're not watching us right now, subscribe, leave some comments. It's always fun to interact with you guys over there. And of course, the OGs over on Apple Podcasts, rate, review, subscribe. Greatly appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.